Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hunting for Silver Linings. Today is Tuesday, January 5th, here in the Great Lakes region of the United States. We are joined today with a very special guest. We have our chapter director in Lagos. And we've started this podcast series last year in March because we were curious to see how things were transpiring across the globe and how our chapter director brothers and sisters were faring in every market, and also an opportunity to introduce them to the global community of not only startup grind directors but also other ecosystems. We found that the biggest opportunity we have is to break down stereotypes of what it's like in other ecosystems around the world, and through their on-the-ground experience. So welcome, really excited to meet you, and I'm sorry, could you let me know how do I
My
name?
name, right? Yeah, just Uwem. Uwem is fine.
Uwem.
Uwem.
All right.
Yeah, yeah,
Uwem,
yeah.
so great to have you with us today. And if you could start with a little introduction about who you are, your background,
Mm.
and finish up with how you ended up with Startup Grind.
Okay. My name is Uwem for short. Forget about how long my name is. And I'm actually very passionate about entrepreneurship, and this comes from my belief that it is through entrepreneurship and small businesses that we can develop the continent of Africa. A lot of people assume or see Africa as being backwards, and they're not so far from it. Even if there are so many advances on the continent, we're still playing catch up, and that's because entrepreneurs and innovators are not being empowered to do what they have to do to create value, and that's basically core to what I believe in and core to what I do. And so, because I had passion in entrepreneurship, I obviously tried. I ran my businesses right out of college. If you failed, because I'm always trying to do the next best thing. If you failed, if you did well, but I from everything I did, I picked up lessons along the way, and it made me see that there was so much more that we could do for the ecosystem. So it's one thing to say, hey, everybody needs access to finance, but in running a business, you realize that finance is just a subset of the things you need to succeed in business. And on the African continent, it's way more important that you focus not just on money, but all the other additional support. And so I became an advocate for building the ecosystem, building entrepreneurship ecosystem. I had the opportunity of starting and forming and also running the largest entrepreneurship initiative on the African continent by an African billionaire. It was $100 million endowment fund, which I ran for 5 years. And that's kind of exposed me to the experiences of entrepreneurs continent wide. And it made me see that talking to startup directors, talking startup grind directors, I travel to the US once every year, talking to entrepreneurs in the US. I find the problems are the same, really. The core problems are the same. And entrepreneurs all around the world are making similar mistakes. And that kind of made me double down on the kind of, the effort I put into influencing the ecosystem. And that even brings me to Startup Grind. I remember in one of my searches, I'm an avid Googler. I love to Google. Like, I might not read a whole book, but I might Google everything that is in that book. I literally Google for a living because information, there's so much information out there. And I believe that those that seek information are eventually find information, right? And it was in one of my Googling sprees that I stumbled on Startup Grind 4 or 5 years ago. And I was like, oh, this looks like a very interesting community because I believe so much in community. That's another thing I believe in, that nobody succeeds as an island. And if you're going to build a sustainable and successful business rather, you would need a community around you, a community of people that have complementary skills. And I saw that Startup Grind was that kind of community, and I wanted to replicate what was happening global and in Europe. I wanted to replicate it in Nigeria. And coincidentally, somebody actually started try to have a chapter in Lagos years before, but it didn't really work out. But I had to rethink. So I realized that, and that brings us to the nuance of different locations. In Nigeria, in Lagos especially, what excites the entrepreneurs is different from what you find, let's say, in California, or
Mhm.
when you're talking to entrepreneurs in Miami. Different things excite them, and so I had to tweak that messaging of community, and in such a way that it kind of attracted the entrepreneurs in our ecosystem. Obviously, you have to lead with money. People are so moved with money. So you're talking about how to raise funds, how to meet that angel investor, how to pitch your idea, anything around money. And then we gradually started introducing other things that I think were core to building a successful business, like building the right team, how important your emotional and your physical well-being is to business. And with that, we began to form a strong community of startup grinders that eventually has now moved on to other cities across Nigeria.
Yeah, and it looks like Yorgo, the co-host, is joining us, so we can introduce him to you. I appreciate that introduction and how you found Startup Grind. Now, when you found Startup Grind 4 years ago, had you already been involved in that $100 million fund?
Yes. We were at that initial state where, so it was a question of, we started something we didn't know, we didn't expect it to, not that we didn't expect, I mean, we don't start expecting to fail, but we didn't know it was going to be very impactful. So it was a question of the billionaire calling us into a meeting and saying, hey, I want to rethink the way I give out money. I don't want to just give out free money. I believe that if we fund SMEs, it's a better way of me giving out money. Go think up a solution and come back with it. And we sat down within the team and said, man, the ecosystem needs a lot of help. If we are funding and training and mentoring entrepreneurs, that would be a better way to utilize his money, the money he wants to use for CSR and all that. And so we brought forth the idea of crafting a program around entrepreneurs, and he funding 1,000 entrepreneurs across the continent every year. And I was already involved in Startup Grind around that period. So it just felt like a good fit. Because everything I was learning from the community while building that Lagos Entrepreneurship Committee and building that Lagos Startup Grind Community, I took that learning into the program, and it helped us craft the learning content around starting your business, building your business, forming your team, pitching, all those things. From all the questions from the committee also helped me guide the team in building out the program.
Great. I do want to give just a quick minute for Yorgo to introduce himself and say hello.
Uwem, I'm very impressed by your background, and I'm delighted that you were able to join Corey and myself in today's interview.
Thank you.
It is impressive. I've spent a lot of my childhood in South Africa. I'm familiar with the challenges of being both an immigrant and an entrepreneur, especially when you come from minority. I think that you have tremendous opportunities ahead of you. I come from the world of investment banking and corporate finance. So I have been working around the world with small and medium-sized companies, but also governments and regional governments on growth policies. And I always have my eyes on products, people, processes, and innovation. Without innovation in these three areas, you cannot progress. You cannot do good. Yeah. This essentially, you've seen on our website on Hunting for Silver Linings, our mission, vision, and goals. But in a quick way, if you want, my grandfather used to say that the last suit has no pockets. I keep on saying that whatever you do in life stays here, so it's better be good. By helping entrepreneurs and innovators, and by bringing together the capital with the future, we're able to impact the communities and help humanity progress. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that brings us to we're all driven as chapter directors by the Startup Grind values, right? The help others before you help yourself, give before you take.
Yeah.
We're here to make friends, not contacts, making sure that our relationships aren't transactional, right? Like right now, we're developing with the beginning of a relationship that will continue for a very long time and be equitable. So to that end, that's maybe one of the best ways to go into intentionally building an ecosystem that needs a little bit of help, right? So an ecosystem needs density, it needs resources, and it needs talent. And Lagos is known for being an incredibly busy, active, and mature ecosystem.
Yeah.
And many ecosystems within the African continent have had like this type of success where within 5 years they've developed amazing ecosystems, despite infrastructure challenges, education challenges, et cetera, whatever. Can you speak a little bit about what it's like to be in one of the busiest, largest ecosystems on the continent, and what that means for your interaction in the region?
Well, Lagos is always busy. I think the nearest city I've been to that is close to is New York, and Lagos still beats New York. It's really busy, it's dense, there is a lot of activity. Everybody has this mentality of hustling, so everybody's always on the run. So I mean, if you spend a year in Lagos and step outside Lagos, it's like everybody's going in slow-mo because Lagos is a madhouse. However, Lagos is known for its innovation, and so you find that there's a concentration of talents in Lagos. Most of the businesses that eventually want to build out their product or figure out product market fit eventually come to Lagos because of the density, because of the penetration of the internet, because of the level of the market, right? So they have access to mobile devices. They're willing to try out new products and services. And so, yeah, Lagos is that. But what's very important about Lagos is what I always call the push-pull effect of entrepreneurship. Now, we know very well that the African continent, and Lagos especially, is lagging in terms of core infrastructure. Lagos is even doing way better than a lot of cities in Nigeria and in Africa. But what we see is entrepreneurs taking it upon themselves to build the infrastructure. Now, the reason why I mentioned at the beginning the push-pull effect of entrepreneurship is that a couple of entrepreneurs sit down and decide to build infrastructure that the government has failed to build, right? So, and what you now have is other entrepreneurs building stacks on top of that same infrastructure that was originally built by that small entrepreneur beside his room. And then you begin to see new markets opening, new type of products developing, because one person took it upon himself to plug in the gap where the government was failing. And that's what we're beginning to see across the African continent. You see one of the companies that the VC that I'm with now invested in Paystack, we just got acquired by Stripe, was one of them. Many years ago, in terms of reaching on the deserved and all the terms that exist, and in terms of financial transactions, Nigeria was way back, way behind. The people that had the power were the banks, the traditional banks, right? Because they had the infrastructure. And then here comes one guy, one quiet guy that never goes for interviews. He's a hermit. He literally just built out a payment infrastructure and then got into YC. And from there he became very successful, and Stripe acquired them last year, and now he has expanded across Africa. Now, because of that infrastructure he has built, we're now having more businesses plugging into their APIs and building out their products and services. And so, like I said, you're now having that push-pull effect where opportunities never existed. One person built an infrastructure and now supports other people that are now building out more products, and it cuts across the various sectors. In transportation, we've seen people saying, okay, let's think beyond the bad roads. How else can we smoothen that logistics sector? How else can we create solutions that will help us in logistics and help SMEs deliver their goods and services as quick as possible? Like I said, cuts across even into medicine and into education. And thankfully, okay, no, maybe not thankfully, COVID has been an accelerator in terms of adoption, because while these products and services were being built or were there, people were not really adopting because there was no need. They didn't really see the need. But COVID has now accelerated the need to adopt new technologies. Now, we do not know if people will continue adopting post-COVID, but as entrepreneurs, you take a risk and you keep on building and building, because changing human behavior oftentimes takes time, to be honest, especially when you come from a continent where people are used to doing things traditionally in a certain way, you're kind of set in stone. And so you find that the early movers tend to have to do a lot of work and build the foundation so that the guys that come later kind of profit from it. But I mean, that's the whole essence of building an ecosystem that really supports themselves.
Yeah. We often have to check ourselves when we're using this language about what we're excited about for what's to come because of the pandemic, because clearly it's tragic. However, like you said, the level of acceleration is remarkable, and there's really no other way than to look forward to how that's going to benefit the global community. And when we see innovation across borders and between ecosystems and driving the speed of innovation and then acceptance of this technology, right? There's nothing that I think it's okay to be hopeful. I think it's okay to be.
Yeah, it is. I mean, one user case, and I know many people don't believe in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and the likes, but you will find out that Nigeria right now I think we have the second largest transaction volume in Bitcoin. If you had told me a year before, I would have said it's impossible. It would never happen. But with the restrictions from our central bank, with the devaluation of our currency, you find that people are adopting cryptocurrency, and you'll be surprised how much money people are moving across board through cryptocurrency. So yes, there's a lot of adoption, and hopefully it's here to stay.
Yeah, well, like you said, there's that push-pull, right, between the private and public sectors. And when the public sector doesn't react or respond or provide the security and safety, and the private sector can, why not? And so, and I would say that it's not a new phenomenon. If people have to find their own local currency that operates better than the actual federal currency or government currency, they do so, whether it's in Cuba, whether it's in a small town in Missouri with the wooden coins. Like it happens, right? Because we have to look after our own self-interests at the end of the day. We have families to feed, businesses to run, and stuff like that. So for those who aren't aware of the popular sectors in your region, you've covered a few already: education, fintech, healthcare. Like we already talked about, your ecosystem is bustling. It's one of the busiest in the world, and so many entrepreneurs come to Lagos to launch their startup. Right? What are the hot sectors as we're mid-pandemic, and what are some of the opportunities you see as we're rounding the corner here?
Yeah, before I even go into that, I think the most important thing people need to realize that where there are problems, then there are opportunities to build businesses and make a lot of money, really. And you find out that certain businesses are making a killing on the continent because the problems exist, really. And as entrepreneurs, your mindset should be, how do I create value for that person that's looking for a solution to his problem? How do I be that solution? And so for Lagos, like I mentioned, fintech is big because we are trying to widen the financial gap in the sense that we want to reach more people that don't have access to financial services. The typical Nigerian doesn't have a credit score, but you find out that startups are coming up with creative ways to build a credit score for people, from your use of social media to how we call it recharge, buy data on your phone, or buy airtime on your phone, to things as your chats. It's interesting how people are building solutions where solutions do not exist. To medicine, there is a higher adoption of telemedicine. In Africa, we are very family knit, right? So oftentimes it's difficult for somebody to go consult with another doctor that is not within the family unit. But you're beginning to see health tech companies come up with creative ways around that. You're beginning to see health tech companies build. So health tech companies break down the sector and pick one particular part that is problematic and solve. So rather than solving as a whole, a good example would be maybe radiology. You find out that most of the people that can read the scans are most likely not based in Nigeria. So you find like a startup will build a platform that links a doctor in the US to a hospital in Nigeria that can read the scans and prefer solutions to. I'm not a health person, so I'm going to just do all that mumbo jumbo. So logistics, shipping across the African continent is problematic. It's cheaper to ship something to France than to ship something to Togo. Togo is just at the corridor of Nigeria. And so you find that startups are coming up with creative ways to ship things across the continent, be it through using private airlines to even signing concessions or signing deals with the typical airliners to move products and services across the continent. And so yeah, so I've mentioned health, I've mentioned financial, ed tech is becoming a big deal now because of the high cost of data. You find startups that are taking health ed tech offline, so building solutions such that people can access educational content offline. You just need to connect to the internet to download the content, and then offline you can use it. So people are just coming up with creative, very, very creative ways to solve these problems.
Yeah, I was speaking with a director in an emerging market, and they were talking about how their infrastructure constraints, they're real, but it doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity. And so he started speaking about the SMS of things, and that kind of blew my mind because I have my prejudices here in the U.S. where I have the Internet of Things, right? And then to learn about the exciting market and growth in the SMS of things, that if I had to, I could do the same things I do now with the Internet of Things. I just change the platform. So it's the ingenuity is incredible, and I love hearing stories like that. So you have the benefit of being on both sides of the marketplace. You've been an innovator, you've been the entrepreneur, you've had the ideas, you've been a coach, you've been a mentor, you still are. You're an investor, you're an ecosystem builder. Which one of these roles is your favorite? I'm really interested in learning just maybe a little bit more about you.
To be honest, being the entrepreneur, there is this thing that comes with having to solve problems every day and seeing your baby that you built, you gain traction, gain adoption, and all that. I think being on the entrepreneur side is quite exhilarating. But to be honest, as a VC, it gives me a broader view of the market, broader view of and it helps me. So one of our biggest problems on the continent is access to finance and where the dollars are going to. I'm not saying VCs are lazy, but we tend to chase the sectors that are doing well, and we forget that there are other sectors that just need a bit more cash, and then they begin to boom. And so, as a VC, I'm seeing that we have the power to direct the innovation, what I call it the innovation part, or to lead the innovation, which is something the VC I'm with, which is something we take very serious. I mean, how do you lead innovation across the continent, and how do you help build a pipeline? Because at the end of the day, on both sides, we have a pipeline problem: pipeline of talent, pipeline of very smart business people, pipeline of mentors and all that. And as a VC, I find that I'm in a better position to solve that problem.
I'm skipping around in our typical conversation here. With that level of insight, and when you get so excited about entrepreneurship, I'm sure that you see the excitement in those that are in your flock that you're attending to and they come to you. What are some of the more exciting things that you're involved with now, or have in your periphery or attention? Do you have some entrepreneurs that are addressing some fun problems right now?
Yeah, I know quite a number that are solving different problems, even across the continent. Yesterday I was just talking to one of them that has become my friend. One of trust is the currency that we don't necessarily have on the African continent. We don't trust ourselves. It's weird. Especially when it comes to business. And because of COVID, we've seen the rise of social commerce. So we see that people are selling their services off social media. We're seeing people selling products through social media, but we don't have an escrow system that fits the typical, let me say, the Nigerian user. And so I know somebody that is solving that problem, where you can set up like a temporary escrow while you're transacting with people. And it's actually very creative because it's very easy. In 2 steps, you set up an escrow, put in the money, the vendor or whoever is supposed to do the transaction or do the service for you sees the money and just executes, and when it's done, he indicates he has done, and the money is released. Very simple, very easy. And you find that that's the kind, we have quite a number of those solutions across the continent. Another one that really excites me is and we have two that are major in Nigeria right now. I don't want to mention names, so it doesn't feel like I have a preference. They're giving people access to fractional shares on the New York Exchange and across board. And so, because Nigerians are beginning to see that a better store of your dollar, or if your money might be in dollars, and let's go a step further, in stocks, in top companies, and people are beginning to accept these solutions. 2 years ago, it was hard to buy shares, practically hard, because you probably have to open a bank account in the US, and if you're not from the US, if you're in Nigeria, and it's going to be hell to open an account in the US. But now, through just a platform, you can buy fractional shares, very easy. And there's so many solutions like that are springing up, left, right, and center, and solving those problems that typically we would have had. A good example will also be, the creative payment processors that are out now. Remittances used to be a very, very big problem. So we use the typical Western Unions and MoneyGrams and those services that had their charges were exorbitant. Now you have startups that are helping facilitate remittances. And apart from oil in Nigeria specifically, remittances form a huge part of our GDP. So you see how important that is. People sending money back home to support their younger ones, support their families, to build businesses. And so we see startups that are solving those problems, helping people, move money from their accounts in the US, be it through a crypto exchange or be it through whatever means, to their families in Nigeria. So I've seen quite a number. I like to say that in the last 5-6 years, I've worked with over 50,000 entrepreneurs, directly or indirectly, through a session or through the programs that I've been involved with. So it's quite interesting seeing people solve these problems. I feel like, and this is just taking us a step further, the problem with a lot of African startups is longevity. So you have a great idea, you see a problem you want to solve. However, you're not equipped with the tools to solve the problems. And this is one of the reasons why I detest motivational speakers, and there are quite a number on the continent, because I believe that a soldier that is not armed at the war front will eventually die. And that's the typical state of entrepreneurs across the African continent. You can have all the motivation in the world if you don't have the skills to survive in business. I mean, simple skills as networking skills, you would actually die a painful death. And that's what we want. We want more entrepreneurs to see that you need more than just money. You need other skills to succeed. And that's what I'm beginning to see now, that entrepreneurs are beginning to get more conscious. They say, hey, okay, look at Jeff Bezos. He has built a wonderful businesses. What are the skills? What skills did he have? Forget the fact that or maybe he came from a rich family or had some sort of privilege. But when you look beyond the privilege, there are certain skills that he had that helped him succeed. How can I embrace those skills? How can I imbibe those skills and build my businesses like he has done? So yeah.
So when you're talking with your entrepreneurs and you're helping them out, I imagine a large part of what you're doing is helping them. You're asking them questions and challenging them to address their mindset, right? And then also, is it fairly easy to help them build the network, to get that village around them, to get that advisory help, mentorship?
I'll say yes and no. So we come from a culture, and I'm sorry, I'm actually generalizing, but I think we come from a culture where we do not share information that well. We don't document very well, and we do not share. So you find situations where people have succeeded but never tell their story. And most importantly, which is why I love Startup Grind, never tell their failure stories. And that's often an approach I always come from. Everybody that I have worked with me, I tell them, we're going to start with, in short, my philosophy is, why make the mistakes other people have made, right? Why can't you pick out the lessons from them and then avoid those mistakes? Yes, every journey is slightly different, right? But it's best to know the pitfalls to avoid than to make those mistakes and learn along the way. And so I kind of, yeah, we don't share that much. We don't share that much, but we're beginning to see that the new generation of entrepreneurs, thankfully, are beginning to see the importance of sharing their story and sharing their journey. Thanks to Startup Grind and many other communities that are springing up left, right, and center. And people are beginning to open up and say, hey, this is what I had to do to build this business. I made this mistake. Please don't make this mistake. Or I have this network of people. How about you pitch to us and then we find creative ways to solve your problem? We are beginning to see, and we even seen it in the US, founders going ahead of VCs and funding other businesses. I personally know quite a number that lead top startups in Lagos that are funding businesses from their pockets, right? Because we can't leave the success of the ecosystem to just anybody. We want to be involved, and we're beginning to see more entrepreneurs wanting to be involved in success of, and I mean, and look, if you look at the upside, if the businesses succeed, you also succeed. And that's what I tell people. In short, I tell people, and sometimes people look at me and laugh. I say everybody is inherently selfish, right? However, you can tailor that you can tailor your selfishness to benefit the ecosystem. Really, you want to make money, fine. Why don't you find entrepreneurs across the ecosystem that need help, fund them or support them? And when they make money, you make money too, right? You want to be at the forefront of the ecosystem, right? To you, what's more important is your brand. Yes, you can actually support entrepreneurs, you can build communities and be the face. So it's very, very important that and we're seeing it more and more that people are taking the reins and are saying we are the change that we speak about, we are the change that we want to see, and we're going to do our best to influence the ecosystem and help people as much as we can.
I like a lot of what one of the things that I really picked out there is I love telling people that when they're pitching, they're not just pitching for money. Like, ask for input, ask for the relationship. Who do you know that I should be talking to? That's more important than raising probably a portion of your round. And that level of humility also goes a very long way. But I'm going to ask you one kind of a broad question here, and then I'll let George at you. So you've mentioned a couple different times in a couple different ways that things are changing really fast. You mentioned with the adoption of cryptocurrency just in the last year alone, the advent of and adoption of people now appreciating the value of having things written down, at least for transaction purposes, right? And then being more open to stories and understanding the opportunities of having your money elsewhere and safe. Is the idea of what wealth means like changing for the community?
It's actually a very broad question because wealth to different people on the continent is quite different. For one, tribe, let me call them tribe. For one, area, it could be building, big mansions in their village, in quotes, and then working in the cities. For another set of people, they could be sending their children abroad and giving them the kind of education. But what we're beginning to see is people are the new age entrepreneurs and are beginning to invest in assets. So rather than just spend the money buying the best cars, or everybody wants to drive the best cars. In Lagos, everybody wants to show off, right? But we're beginning to see people, we define wealth in terms of the asset class. What can we invest in so that when we talk about our valuation, or when we talk about our net worth, we can point to these things. So yes, maybe the idea of wealth is changing, and because culture, culture evolves now. The typical 20 years ago, the typical African family, Lagos family, let me use Lagos, would have said, oh, we wanted to have children and then have 2 cars, and then the children go on to have more children. But now you're beginning to see young people say, no, I don't want to have that many children. I just want to have 1 child. I want to have 1 house. I want to build a business that, lives beyond my name and all that. Things are, maybe I wouldn't say education. I would say the times, culture is beginning to evolve, and to be honest, we need that evolution because there are so many things in culture worldwide that we need to kill over time, and we're beginning to see that the young people are doing that. And so yes, back to your question, wealth, the idea of wealth is evolving. People are beginning to invest more in various types of asset class, from real estate to stocks in top performing companies, to investing even in other entrepreneurs and businesses rather than before, where people were just accumulating money in their bank accounts and buying all the cars that they could find.
That's great. I know that we're tracking that as we have these conversations across the globe, and it's just really, it feels good to hear this from not just little pockets around the planet, but really almost every conversation that we have. George, do you have some questions?
I'd like to thank Uwem. Really great discussion. I mean, it's you're opening up the discussion at very levels, from the philosophical almost down to the very practical. Starting with practical questions, what is happening to the telecom infrastructure? Is it enough wide to accept, first of all, to cover Nigeria, and B, to take these new apps as they are emerging?
Telecoms is actually a core infrastructure in Nigeria and even across the African continent. You have the likes, I mentioned the three major ones. You have MTN, Airtel, and Vodafone. And Vodafone is more in the French-speaking countries. But if I'm going to be specific, in Nigeria, you have MTN, which has the largest coverage, and Airtel, which I would rate them in terms of their infrastructure. I think they have a better infrastructure in terms of access to data and internet. They are doing quite well because the economy, to be honest, is built on communication. And if you cannot communicate to your supplier in that farm in that far away suburb, I won't say suburb because that's so US. That village, I would say village because it is literally a village. You probably will not get your produce on time. You probably will miss out on your supply. And so telecoms is a big deal. The problem with telecom is that it is very, very expensive to run on the continent because you need power, you need security. Those two things are a problem. Power in the sense that you find telecoms that they have to power each of their base stations themselves because the electric supply is erratic. Security because people want to break into valuable things and steal and resell because poverty levels are not necessarily going down. So poverty level in the last 1 year, poverty levels, thanks to COVID-2, has really soared. So you have more people living in poverty than before. And we're beginning to see, and this is even another conversation, we begin to see a widening gap where the rich are getting very rich because they've plugged into solutions that people are buying and using daily. And then the poor are getting very poor and dependent because they've lost their jobs and all that. Well, back to the telecoms. The telecoms industry is doing extremely well. What we want to see now is the regulators allow telecoms handle money. Now, especially in the case of Nigeria, the regulators, the Central Bank of Nigeria said, we don't want telecoms to handle money. But if you just go to the east of Africa, to Kenya, you'll find out that Vodafone and Safaricom actually has done so well with mobile money. And because of mobile money, right down in that village, you have people moving money, paying for goods and services, very, very easy. I tell people that if we have better financial services than the US, and I can beat my chest to it in terms of how well we move money and in terms of security. Now, I'm not saying customer service and all that are terrible at that. However, in how well we move money on the continent, especially in East Africa, it's superb. Now, back to Nigeria, the central bank has said we don't want telecoms to handle money because they want to have a tight hold on, the valuation of the currency and how much money is moving around. The financial space in Nigeria is heavily regulated, anyways. So, what we want to see in the next few months and next few years is the federal government of Nigeria allowing telecoms handle money so that more people, because the best way to reach customers across Nigeria is through mobile phone, because those telecommunication companies like MTN and the Airtels of this world they've done so much work over the years to reach even the hinterland, even places that you typically won't travel to.
Thank you. That's interesting that you mentioned this, because this is very similar to our experience in India, namely that power grid is insufficient. Therefore, you have the mobile telecommunications leapfrogging away from traditional infrastructure. At the same time, the cost of provision of services is exorbitant. It's a very, very expensive service. So almost by default, you have a widening of both a gap, but also equality. And this is my next question. What is happening with the tribes in Nigeria? Are all tribes getting access to the opportunity? Do you have equality of opportunity for everybody? And what about immigrants? Because Nigeria is attracting a lot of immigrants from West Africa. I mean, it's the hot pot.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a tremendously well-developed network. What is happening in that area?
Yeah, except for specific areas, and I would say very small areas, Nigeria is actually very accepting to foreigners and to immigrants across the continent. I agree that, and that's something that has to do with mindset. We tend to find people more open to. People are more open to. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, people are more open to Westerners, but Nigeria is generally accepting to outsiders, and what we see is Nigerian, because we have a lot of people saying we want to work our way out of poverty. They're really open to working with anybody that can make them good money, to be honest. But yes, there are certain regions that are religious hotspots where religion has clouded their minds and people think along the lines of fanaticism. But generally, the major cities across Nigeria, Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, Calabar, most of them are open to collaborating with immigrants, with Westerners, with VCs, and people are running multi-billion-dollar businesses from the cities.
Thank you. That's very good to know that essentially we're moving into a more secular approach to decision making as opposed to caste or tribe or whatever. Which brings the question, of course, female entrepreneurs. We've seen that throughout Africa, females and young female entrepreneurs are powerful, they're successful, they're emerging. What is your experience?
I could write a book on this. I mean, this was something we had to deal when I was running the entrepreneurship program I spoke about earlier. We struggled with getting women involved, and interestingly, I've met so many amazing female entrepreneurs building multi-million-dollar businesses, but it's so hard when you have opportunities, and because of the system that these women grow up in, and because of the structure, you find out that women tend not to take these opportunities that serious. So they're more concerned about my home, my child. I've had people drop out of programs because they wanted to focus on raising their children. But like I said earlier, I think I mentioned it, that you see younger people the mindset is beginning to change. People are thinking beyond their family and thinking at the impact. So a typical Nigerian family will think their impact is I want to have children, my children go on to school and have more children. But you're seeing younger people are saying we want to think impacts and our legacy beyond children, beyond our name. We want our legacy to be that we, moved a certain region out of poverty. We want to build great businesses. And that's what's beginning to happen, Mama. Because of that, we have more women, getting involved. We have a lot of women centered programs, and more women are beginning to step, be at the forefront. And men are beginning to see also that, you don't have to be a man. You don't have to be in front to be a man, really, because I feel like a lot of these things, it's a mindset thing. You don't have to be, at the forefront, calling the shot to be a man or profit from a business venture. I've worked with somebody, and this is just a sad tale, where she said every time she went for a business meeting, she took her father. She was owner of the company, but she took her father because she wanted a man to be there. The father, because he was older, instantly got respect. But meanwhile, she was the brains behind. But we're going to see, as people are getting older, as more young people are getting into government, and more young people are becoming decision makers, things are changing. And women are also beginning to lift their voices and say, hey, we want to be part of the conversation. You can't make a decision that affects everybody and we're not part of the conversation. And interestingly, from what I've seen, and studies have shown that women, at the end of the day, if women succeed, they actually build better homes. If women succeed, the children are raised better. So why don't we let the women succeed, for goodness sake? Why don't we put them out, allow them to do what they need to do to be at the forefront, to make their mistakes. It's okay for them to make mistakes, because it's interesting because when men make mistakes, we kind of accept it. When a woman makes mistakes, we're like, there's so much critique around their work. So yeah, more women are getting involved, and I've been very opportune to work in organizations that has allowed women to be at the forefront. I believe, and it's one of the things we look at as VCs. When we look at your business, we ask, what's the concentration of women? It may be cliche, but I also believe that women are better decision makers, are better handlers of money. So I tend to look at how many women do you have, in your ops team who use handling your finances and all that. So yeah, more women are getting involved, and we hope that the trend continues to go on up.
Write the book. That's the only thing I can say. When you write the first draft, we're going to put it on Startup Grind. I'm telling you. Write the book. And we can combine it with some of our own stories. But what you're saying is a wonderful, wonderful message. Let me jump to the last couple of questions that I have because of the interest of time. You mentioned in the course of the interview that you've come across more than 50,000 entrepreneurs over the last few years and so on and so forth. Now you are involved in a VC, and you told us the story. How large is the VC that you're involved in terms of both investee companies but also capital?
Okay, our fund one, which we would probably use up in the next 2-3 months, was $10 million. We have a portfolio of about 20 companies. One has exited to Stripe. We're raising a fund two, which is going to be a $50 million fund, and hopefully we should close on that at the first quarter of 2022, hopefully. And so yeah, right now 20 companies are portfolio.
What is the sectoral allocation?
Of them doing very well.
What is the sectoral allocation?
We're actually sector agnostic. For us, what's most important is that you're leveraging on tech and targeting a potential billion-dollar market. That's most important to us. And then then all the additional things we look at as a VC. But importantly, you're heavily leveraging on tech because we know that it is through tech that you can scale and solve problems faster than even the government can.
So you're shooting for unicorns, which is great. Now, in our experience, well, actually, let me ask you in a different way. Out of 100 companies that you interview, how many do you get into the fund? 1%,
so
half a percent?
Fund,
yep. Mm-hmm.
It's probably one. I mean, we've interviewed quite a number, and we just have 20 in our portfolio. We don't have, to be honest, we don't have the resources to even fund all the companies we like. I mean, last year, December, 3 companies got approval from our investment committee, and we still couldn't fund them because we literally ran out of funds. They are really great businesses across the continent. So oftentimes we have to pick and choose. And obviously there's a bit of bias sometimes from the partners and all. But we oftentimes have to pick and choose because we have limited resources, which is why I'm really happy that, there's more focus on the VC space in Africa. More LPs are beginning to invest in funds across the continent because I believe that just like what happened in India in the last couple of years, we're beginning to see unicorns, spring up across the continent, and we're going to see that rise over time.
Which of course now brings the next question. You are doing your best. You're investing in great speed. You obviously have checks and balances, but what is happening to the supply of capital? Is it only private individuals, successful entrepreneurs, and high net worth individuals who are supporting startups? Or do you see a more, forget the IMF and the World Bank, who keep on saying, well, invest, and they end up doing very little. But what are the sources of capital at the moment? If Corey and I were to land tomorrow in Lagos and we came to your door and say, Uwem, we have a wonderful idea about digitalizing telehealth care, right? Yeah. Psychology, whatever. And we set up shop and you say, okay, well, I've run out of my money in my first fund, but you can go there. What is there?
So first of all, I like to say that I have a bias for private sector because I'm of the belief that it's the private sector that would actually do the most good and the most impact on the continent of Africa. I don't know about any other place. If we are going to wait for the government, we're going to keep on waiting and things will never happen. So the private sector has to be at the forefront. And that this includes, high net worth individuals. This includes entrepreneurs that have become successful. This includes VCs and angels. And we're beginning to see a rise. So the typical high net worth individual back in the days would put his money in the bank and, just amass wealth. But things are beginning to change. People are beginning to see that another way to exit and make a lot of money is actually invest in entrepreneurs. And we're beginning to see that more people are actively playing in that. And so, yeah, one of our superpowers, I always say in Ingressive Capital, the VC that I'm with, is that we don't just give money, we link you up with the resources you need. So we have a network of VCs across the world, VCs across the continent, and we always link people up. We always do that intro. Even if we cannot fund you, we will definitely intro you to somebody that can help you. That's the whole essence of a community. You need a community that, even if you can't solve the problem for them, even if one person can't solve the problem for you, the person can refer you to somebody else that can solve the problem for you. And it's important. This is actually very important. And this is why I tell people, grow your network, because referrals are the fastest way to open doors for you. Really, you can do all the work, and not go far. And then one referral changes, your life. It changes everything for you. And so you need to build. I tell them, build your network of VCs, even if you don't need them now. Start building that network so that when you need them, and they know that you're trustworthy, because trust is one currency that is really hard to come by. I know people only refer those that they trust, right? So yeah, private sector has to be more involved. I would always refer you to private sector. I will not refer you to any government or a government grant and all that. And we were even beginning to see that funds from developmental organizations are beginning to get funneled into entrepreneurship. One example is the program I was with before, the 100 million endowment. After year 5, where we had trained 10,000 entrepreneurs, trained, funded, and mentored 10,000 entrepreneurs, we found that the UNDP came to us and said, "Oh, we like the program. We like that you built a structure. You know what? Take $300,000. No, take $1 million and execute a program and fund 200 entrepreneurs." We're beginning to see that they are seeing that there's another way to do things. So rather than just give the government for some people to squander the money and not build the infrastructure, they are beginning to fund, these programs that are at the grassroots, and that's something we want to see more of.
Thank you. This is it's been a great interview, and I really enjoyed listening to your views. It's eye-opening to me to hear how advanced you are in both your practical experience, but also in the organization. And by the way, since we started this interview, we have only had one little hiccup in telecommunications. We have better connection across the Atlantic than even within the US. Thank you once again.
Yeah, sometimes. So with the last couple minutes that we do have, I like to ask every chapter director the same last two questions. First, as the entrepreneurial ecosystem mayors of our own chapters, I like to hear what's the most popular or most impactful advice you are currently giving folks that are coming your way, in your email inbox, your LinkedIn inbox,
that would be that don't wait for perfect, and perfection doesn't exist. And as entrepreneurs, because I've played on both sides, I know that we make that mistake of, waiting for the perfect time, waiting for the stars to align, build the perfect product, write the perfect code. But that is all, it never works. The minute you're, trying to be perfect, somebody's already running and, figuring out product market fit and getting all the feedback that he needs to build a better product. So instead of chasing perfection, chase progress. And that's my always my main advice. Chase progress. Perfection, you can never attain perfection.
And and I appreciate that. That's not like fancy new wisdom either, right? Someone asked me this question a few days ago, and I said my advice is the same advice I've been giving all the time. I just I give it more often because things are moving so much faster now. The last question is we asked this because as chapter directors and because of the values of Startup Grind, we're so busy asking everyone else what do they need. So now is our opportunity as a global Startup Grind community to ask you what can we do for you? How can the Startup Grind community help you?
I think it will still be tied to, I wouldn't say funding because everybody needs money, but I would say more of support in terms of mentoring and advice for the community. So many people need, we need access to that advice advice is important. Advice and guidance, right? When I mean advice, I'm not saying do the work for the people, but give them some sort of give them direction. A lot of people have an idea, they know what they want to do, but they don't know how to go about it, and oftentimes they get stuck because of lack of infrastructure, lack of access to the things that they need, and sometimes it just takes another person giving advice and telling them, you can do this. Why don't you tweak the product to all that? And a lot of people in the startup grind community are really, really knowledgeable people, man. Big ups to the community. The amount of knowledge in this community is actually amazing, and I feel like we can do way more for the communities across the continent if we're more involved in mentoring sessions, and even if it's quick fire events where we just listen to people's pitches and just give that quick advice on what they can do to their business to grow.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the generosity of your time today. And
thank you.
Yeah, George, any last thoughts or questions?
If you need any help in your coaching session, let us know. Both Corey and I have extensive experience in training and coaching and mentoring. We want to open ourselves to being active locally in any part of the world where we can help. Luckily, with Zoom, we can have the video and you can play it.
Yeah.
If you need any resources from corporate governance to Series A to decision making to how to make a presentation, I'm sure you're covering that in your own presentations and efforts. But if there's any way we can help, let us know.
Great. Thank you, George and Corey. Thanks for having me. It's been actually awesome.
Great to meet you. Look forward to catching up again in a few months, maybe, and then have a great Happy New Year, okay?
Can you